once you go like a week without the sugar and shit, like you really don't miss it. That's what I realized. And like you feel so good, but once you have it for a little bit, you forget how easy it is to slip back in. When I was playing sports, all I could think about was like making sure like I could nurse my ailments enough to get through the game and like feel okay after. And now it's like something I don't even think about. My ankles are a little cranky in the game. It's like the rare exception. It kind of like shocks me almost like when it's happening, because like it happens so rarely at this point. It's for me like the flexibility stuff and like the joint mobility exercises. Like I think that's like a huge thing. So even when I was doing like yo-yoing between like eating crappy foods and carnivore, when I was still doing the workout that you guys gave me with all the proper stretching and mobility stuff, I still noticed like the benefit of that stuff on my knees and ankles. When you eat shit, like you physically cannot focus the same way. Like mental stuff aside, like it's just completely different. You wrote eat to live, not live to eat.
What's up? Welcome back. My name is Darko, and in this video I'm going to share with you an interview with one of my clients, Mr. Seth Kaufman from New York City, and he's going to share his story of where he was, where he is now, with our help, and also what he does for a living. And maybe you can see yourself in some of what he says and relate to some of his story. So Seth, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So first of all, let's put the microphone a bit closer.
Sure. I just didn't want to like mess with it after you
No
did
worries.
the sound stuff.
So first of all, yeah, where are you from? What do you do? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from New York, just outside the city. Lived in the city for some of my life too. Pretty quiet area, like pretty standard life.
Yeah.
And then went to college, and after that decided to start my own business. And like slowly throughout my 20s, I kind of drifted more and more toward like being a digital nomad, I guess. And just a lot of stuff like broke me away from like living the standard 9 to 5, and now I find myself living in Bali for most of the year.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so in case you were wondering, we were sitting in my office, which is how he's here in Bali, and so I want to talk about where you were before you joined me. Like, what inspired you to get help from me?
Yeah, so before we started talking, I actually was following some like men's lifestyle blog before that was like a popular thing.
Yeah.
And the guy suggested eating like a basically like meat and eggs only diet. And like I had heard of it before, but he was like really preaching it to the point where it got me to think about like what my diet is and maybe even like trying it. So probably for like 6 months before I met you, I didn't even really know what carnivore was, but I was kind of dabbling in my own version of trying it. And I guess when we met, what appealed to me was like you were further down that path than I was, and I wanted to learn from somebody who was living exactly what that was, because I was feeling much better once I started eating that way. And I guess everyone where I'm from like thought I was crazy when I started just basically eating steak 2-3 times a day. So I wanted to begin to surround myself with people who could relate to like everything I was going to be going through, and just kind of model that in my mind of like how to live that life, I guess.
That's cool. And then, so you found me, we had a call, and then actually one of my mutual friends, Dominic, the guy who I actually learned a lot from, coached you for a while. And how was that experience?
It was good. I actually, up until recently, I pretty much religiously used like the workout plan that you guys gave me, just because like there was a lot of stuff on there that he initially gave me that I couldn't really do, or I could only do like a couple reps of. So I've really just spent like a few years kind of like building up my body and becoming way more flexible with like the cars stuff that you gave me. Like I had never done stretching or mobility stuff like that ever. So it's just definitely a big change from where I started a few years ago. Yeah.
And what would you say was the biggest breakthrough or anything? What was the thing when you look back at it now?
Yeah.
Like what was the thing? And you're like, oh yeah, I got that from doing that.
Yeah. For me, it was just like the flexibility of like different joints I have in my body, because I play sports a lot. And when I was in college, I started facing what I thought was like chronic inflammation, or like chronic patellar tendonitis. And I would constantly like sprain my ankles also. So every time I wanted to play football or basketball, I'd have to like tape up my ankles, tape up my knees, like wear braces, all this stuff, just so I can not feel like crappy and like exhausted from the just like running up and down the court. And like, I shit you not, like literally within 60 days of like beginning to work with you guys, all my knee inflammation, all my patellar tendonitis, my ankle sprains like went away. Like I've literally never worn an ankle brace since like 3 years ago when we started working together. So that's like been the biggest thing for me.
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
And now you're playing sports pain free?
Yeah, pain free. Unless I like ever slip up and have like a couple junk days in a row, and then like I feel it really quickly. But yeah, that's like my biggest like immediate feedback loop that kind of keeps me going right, just right
So
there.
you feel like you're more sensitive to what you're putting in your body now?
Definitely. Like I don't know if it's, everyone always thinks like, oh, like they can't eat whatever food because they're getting older. But I really think it's just since I cut out stuff, I notice how crappy I probably felt like all the time before without even realizing it.
Yeah. That's what I say a lot. Like, you know, you go in, if you don't smoke and you go into a smoker's house, you'll smell the smoke, but they don't smell it, right? It's like
Yeah, exactly. That's actually like, I've noticed that in Bali this time, like so many people smoke and like I don't even want to be around it. So like I've kind of like limited my time around certain people just because I don't want to breathe that in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, yeah, you mentioned you're playing sport. How often are you playing sport every week?
Yeah, probably at least 2 to 3 times a week between basketball, volleyball. I do a little less often here, but basketball I'm playing at least twice a week usually.
You play in Bali?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you're like, what position do you play?
Here it's kind of just like pick up games. Everyone's kind of switching on each other. Nothing official.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, because that's a lot of pressure on your knees, right? All that jumping and stuff, running.
It is. And like I used to do when I was in college, like probably many years before I met you, I was doing a workout specifically to try and like learn how to dunk. And it was so bad on my knees. Like I can get through like 2 weeks of the workout. It was like a 14-day cycle and you kind of repeated it and like increased the intensity over time. And by the time I did like 3 months of that, my knees were just shot because it couldn't handle like with the diet I had and just I was never used to like doing that intense of like a weighted exercise. And I think that's like another thing to go back to your question before, like some of the major benefit I got from working with you guys is like seeing how you can still build your body with like body weight stuff. Cause for me, just the stuff I was doing for my knees was like destroying me. So it's nice to still be able to work on that stuff and like do plyometrics and like all the calisthenic stuff without actually like having so much pressure, like squatting like 100 something pounds, 200 pounds. Cause it really was like killing my knees. Yeah.
So now you have like newfound hope, like more belief that, oh shit, I can actually do stuff. Like I
Yeah.
can actually play sport to a higher level now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And for longer too.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it used to be that when I was playing sports, all I could think about was like making sure like I could nurse my ailments enough to get through the game and like feel okay after. And now it's like something I don't even think about. Like if I happen to feel like my ankles are a little cranky in the game, it's like the rare exception. It kind of like shocks me almost like when it's happening because like it happens so rarely at this point.
So what do you put that down to? Do you think it's solely your diet, or do you think it's like coupled with the workouts as well?
Yeah, I think it's the diet for sure, but it's for me like the flexibility stuff and like the joint mobility exercises. Like I think that's like a huge thing because like at first when I started eating carnivore, it was kind of like cycling a little bit because like I wasn't used to it and like I was still kind of in the mindset of that was like a streak to attain rather than like my lifestyle.
Right.
So even when I was doing like yo-yoing between like eating crappy foods and carnivore, when I was still doing the workout that you guys gave me with all the proper stretching and mobility stuff, I still noticed like the benefit of that stuff on my knees and ankles, like big time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great news because there's a lot of people out there that they think that just having bad knees is just old age.
Right. Yeah.
I'm old. Of course my knees are fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually, it's something that kind of, it frustrates me a little bit because like I've seen like how quickly I can get results from like thinking that I had chronic joint issues and like knee issues, and like all my friends in college know like that I was literally not able to like play without wearing brace and brace. So now like when I try and just share my experience lightly with people, like people aren't always receptive to like what you have to say when it's not the mainstream advice that disagrees with like conventional science. So like that's something I've had to learn to just like pull back from and like accept like they're going to do whatever they want.
Yeah. And eventually they'll come to you when they've exhausted all their options, and then they're like,
right,
fuck, you're still playing basketball like 3 times a week, bro?
Yeah.
What are you doing differently to me?
Exactly.
And you're like, I fucking told you, boy. I told you. So, so how do you manage to live in Bali? Like, that's an interesting topic.
Yeah. So basically just my business I've been doing since I graduated college. Like I actually went to be a stockbroker.
Oh, nice.
I met somebody when I was in the middle of college who was starting their own business, and for me that was like meeting you with like my health stuff with like carnivore and everything. I really got to see firsthand what life was like, and that it was actually possible to like start your own business, because like everything I had learned from my family was like, oh, you're going to go to college and get an office job in the city and like work on Wall Street. All my cousins went to like Ivy League schools and they all work on Wall Street. So that was just like the model that was set for me my whole life. And then once I started meeting different people, I was working on my business in the summers in college instead of like getting internships at a bank. And I actually graduated college with my first client already. So like I always was like cash flow positive. And I realized a few years ago, or like probably like 3 or 4 years ago, that I was still kind of living a conventional life despite like having a little bit of financial freedom, because like everyone around me was still doing like the 9 to 5 thing. And I got pulled into that because like if I wanted to hang out with my friends or go to the beach or something, it had to be at nights, on the weekends, like whatever. So really I just, after you came to Bali, I was thinking about going to Thailand at the time, and I just figured let me start my travels and just go to Bali. And I gave up my lease in New York City, and that actually coincided right before COVID. I chose not to re-sign for that year, and I ended up here. So now I just kind of live off my business, and yeah.
That's cool, man. That's a cool story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to be living here for a while?
So I'm here for probably like 6 or 7 months out of the year at this point. I did the same thing last year, and then I just go home to see family for the holidays and stuff. So yeah.
So how do you? We can go a lot of ways. So
Sure.
How do you manage your nutrition when you're on the road?
So when I'm on the road, like in Bali, or just like commuting
Bali,
from New York to Bali?
Yeah.
Okay, so when the first time, like when I started coming here, I didn't really know what to do. So I would basically, if I was on the plane, I would just eat like whatever food they gave me and stuff. But now I just use that time to fast, because I don't fast as often as I used to. Ever since I've been eating like most of the time carnivore now, like I found that the fasting kind of like hinders what I do. So I've used it as like a tool to just kind of like get me through when I'm traveling certain places where I don't have access to certain kind of foods. Or I'll just bring like certain snacks with me, like if I can get like beef jerky or something like that, just for the plane.
Yeah.
Or I'll just drink water the whole time and just like refuse the food. Last year when I came here, it was actually kind of funny on the plane, because like everyone was like freaking out about COVID at the time. The stewardess, she kept insisting that I have food, and I'm like, no, I'm really okay. I'm okay. I just want the water. And like she kept asking me like, am I actually sick with COVID? Is that why I'm not eating? And I was like, crap, like maybe she's gonna say something and I won't even get into Bali now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy when like the whole COVID stuff.
Yeah.
It's crazy now because it feels like COVID never existed now.
Right. And it's funny, like living here, even last year when they kind of locked down Bali a little bit, like you didn't hear about it too much. And then like I still have like friends and family from home saying like, this person got it, it's spreading again. And then it's just like, as soon as you hang up, like it's like a non-existent thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So the reason I asked you that question about nutrition is because a lot of people, they struggle with that, right? Like when they travel, like they'll be doing good for a while. Like let's say right now you're in Bali, like, oh, everything's good. But as soon as I travel, oh, fuck, it's all out the window. Like, you know?
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that. Like if you don't have any like rules in place, it's just
right.
Like, yeah, I'll have that. Yeah, sure. You're giving it to me? Oh, yeah, sure. And then you just
exactly
crap.
I think for me, something more difficult than like traveling alone and like not having access to certain foods has been when I travel with friends who aren't eating this way, because it's like there's almost an expectation of myself because of like past behavior to kind of fall back in line with how I used to be with them. So it's just like, oh, I'm going to hang out with X, Y, and Z from college and we're just going to go to the beach and eat shit food for a couple days. And like, that's just, and it's like breaking out of that pattern has been what's kind of more difficult for me. Because like once you go like a week without the sugar and shit, like you really don't miss it. That's what I realized. And like you feel so good, but once you have it for a little bit, you forget how easy it is to slip back in. And you're like, all right, I'm just going to have something today and like justify it. And then a few days later, like you forget how good it feels to like not have that stuff until you just like decide you're not doing it again and break it, I guess.
Yeah. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges is the social implications of changing up what you're eating.
Right.
And then you're the only one in your group that's doing it.
Yeah.
And it's harder to fit in now. And then it becomes like, oh shit, like, do I need to get new friends?
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's something I've kind of went back and forth with. And like, I'm somebody who's like pretty loyal to people who, especially like people who didn't do anything to me. So I've had to try and find a balance between like keeping old friends that have been good to me, that I have good relationships with, while also feeling more confident in asserting like how I live now and how I kind of see stuff, and just like making them say like if they want to hang out with me, like this is how I'm gonna live, this is what I'm gonna eat, and like if you're not cool with that, like so be it.
Yeah. That takes a lot of like sticking to your boundaries, right? Like knowing who you are, the self-worth. It's actually on the board, the self-worth, self-belief.
Nice.
So that's like, if you don't have that, then you're gonna be like, oh yeah, like, yeah, sure, I'll eat that shit. And
right.
Just go back to what you used to do, and it's like, where was the progress?
Yeah. That's something you realize too, is like when you eat out at people's houses, like somebody's cooking for you, they expect you to eat whatever they cook. And like if you don't, it's somehow offensive to them. But if you have someone at your house and they don't want to eat it, it's like no questions asked, like you can't get me to eat that.
Yeah.
And it would be like weird for you to like press it on someone, but that rule doesn't apply like sometimes for other people. It's like it's a weird dynamic, and it's something that I kind of, it slowed my growth with this regard for a couple years, because like I was in a relationship and like my girlfriend's mom would make food for us and like great cook and everything, but it's just like stuff that I didn't want to eat anymore. I would feel so guilty saying no, as though like there was something I was doing wrong that was like offensive or rude to them. And it's been like years of practicing, just saying, no, I'm good. I'm just going to have my steak and nothing else, nothing on it. And like now it's to the point where it's become more normal for people around me. They just kind of expect that. And I feel like that's for like any new thing, it's just like that beginning period of like uncomfortability is always temporary, because like once it becomes normal to you, it's just secondhand like anything else, you know.
Yeah, and it's a practice, right? You have to continuously practice saying no and being okay with that.
Yeah.
At the start, it's hard. It's like, oh, fuck.
Exactly.
Because, oh, fuck, are they taking it personal? But then it's like, I can't be responsible for how someone else feels.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is what you're doing, right?
Right.
Yeah. Because, they're just projecting onto you. And if you don't have that confidence and belief in yourself, then self-esteem, then you're going to be like, oh, fuck. Yeah, I shouldn't really do that. That's bad of me.
Right, exactly. That's something I actually, I mentioned like a girlfriend I used to have, that like confidence and self-esteem, I guess, really came from the breakup from that. I noticed on the bookshelf behind me, you had a book, I don't know if it's yours or the other guys, but a book on like narcissism. And like, I dated a narcissist.
Yeah.
And
so did I.
Kind of, yeah. So you know exactly what it's like recovering from that, and like feeling like you kind of lost your whole identity and sense of direction, and your whole self-worth was tied up in that person. And kind of finding my way back to like my normal life, I guess, has really coincided with my whole journey with like carnivore and like learning to say no and like respecting my boundaries and stuff. Like all that kind of seemed to go together. So it ended up being like one of the best things that really happened to me.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
How old are you, by the way?
29 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like 29, so much wisdom, man. Like I've only learned this stuff in the last 4 years, like all the personal development stuff, like what you're just saying, boundaries, self-worth, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like speaking up, another thing.
Right.
Like expressing how you feel. All this stuff is like, for me, it was like,
yeah.
But yeah, what you said about losing yourself in a relationship with a narcissist, this is another thing, right? Like the relationship stuff, people don't realize that it actually affects food choices.
Yes.
Because it's a stress that from a relationship, and it's like, fuck. And you just eat your feelings.
Yep. So I never had any kind of emotional eating issue my whole life. And like, I grew up in a place where like, my parents both worked and like they were busy, and like me and my sister played sports. So like, we would just after sports like get fast food, and like my mom would cook when she could, but like they didn't have too much money. So like we just did whatever we could for fast, cheap food most of the time. And like my dad eats like absolute shit. Like if you ever saw what he eats, like you would not believe that like, because like I grew up in that environment, I didn't like blow up like a balloon. And like neither of my parents are fat, but like, you would think coming from a place where like there's constantly junk food around, it'd be easier to have an emotional eating issue. But like I never had that my whole life. And then after the breakup, I became like so unhinged with my eating. Like that was my way of coping for a long time, for like a year. And I went from like, I always liked my dessert food like anybody else, but I went from liking the dessert food to like all I could think about was like the next time I'm gonna not feel full and sick enough from like the previous like ridiculous amount of dessert I had to like when it would actually feel good to like eat it again. Like that was my dominating thoughts for a while. And like it took a lot to like kind of figure out what was going on there, because like I said, I never had this my whole life. And like I felt like I understood addiction and like how to get through like vices and stuff. But when it's food, it's totally different, because you can't just cut out food. Like if it's cigarettes or alcohol or whatever it is, you can just throw it out, never look at it again. And then if you have like the discipline to get through it, that's it. But with food, you still need to eat. So it's like, I would convince myself like, all right, I'm good today. Like I'm gonna get through a week and then I'll be fine. And then like I'd get through the week and then I'd like reward myself with like eating a bunch of shit, and like the whole thing would start again. And actually something that was really helpful for that was a Tony Robbins course I took. And it's really designed, I think, like for people who have like an actual weight problem, which I never had. But basically it talks about like using like your mind to kind of adjust like the temperature of certain foods and like live more in alignment with like the long-term benefits or withdrawal or like negatives of eating a certain way. And it wasn't until then that I could like actively feel like I had an intense craving for like a piece of cake or something, and sit in the moment and like just tune it down and like make it even like repulsive, the idea of like wanting that. Like something he said that I still remember, like my favorite line from the whole course was like, imagine like you have cake sitting on the table. It's like exactly the perfect flavor, perfect temperature, everything you want. And then a dog comes over, literally sits, takes a shit on it, turns around and throws up on your cake. Like how intrigued are you by that cake anymore? And like it becomes extremely repulsive, and you no longer have the desire. So like we talked about like habit building and stuff, like doing that over and over again. I was quickly able to like eliminate one by one like foods that I had felt were like the way I turned when I felt really uncomfortable feelings, and just eliminated them as options because they literally became like repulsive to me in my mind.
That's a really powerful technique.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, so that's what helped you get over that after 1 year of being addicted to that thoughts of junk food.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And then another thing was, like I mentioned, I don't fast too much anymore. And the reason is because I got involved with some people who had been doing carnivore for a long time.
Yep.
And just some advice I took from them about like the whole yo-yoing thing and like cravings and stuff was basically to just not restrict anything in any way. And they just said, like, as soon as you eliminate any kind of restrictions, it helps make a difference if you're dealing with urges, and just to try it, not to question it. So I'm like, all right, these people are like years into their journey. I'm just going to try it. And then like, because with intermittent fasting, I was like 1 to 9, I was eating. And like after that, I would just wait until the next 1 to 9 window. And now if it's like 10 o'clock at night and I feel hungry, I'll just get like a few burger patties and just eat that. And I've noticed that like it subsides my cravings whenever I want to eat, I just eat. So that's kind of been like a subtle change that I've adopted, I guess, for me.
Yeah, so you're eating more intuitively now.
Yeah, more intuitively, exactly. Like I don't have, people ask me like how many times a day I eat or like when I eat, and like I don't really know. Like there's certain times of the day I just don't feel hungry, like not even fasting. I just get up and I'm like so focused on something, or I just don't even realize that I haven't eaten all day. And like I'll have days like that, and then I'll have some days where I need to eat like 2 pounds of ground beef, and they just like never know. Like you said, just totally intuitive at this point.
Right, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. That's freedom, you know, like
yes.
Nutrition, like you're free.
Exactly.
You're not feeling confined to this particular diet. I have to eat this now, you know, like you
exactly
can just eat whenever you want, whatever you want.
Do you know Alex Hormozy?
Yep.
So he had a tweet the other day that like kind of perfectly sums up the point of this a little bit. He said like the best productivity hack I know of is elimination. And
I saw
like
that,
yeah, so like when I think about with the eating, it's like people on the surface think like carnivore is like so prohibitive, but actually it's like the opposite, because by eating like basically the same kind of food all the time, you're eliminating like the confusion, the choice, the headache of like, should I eat this? Should I not? Like the back and forth, like so many negatives are eliminated by just making like one simple decision that like, I'm going to eat meat, and like, that's it.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's like, yeah.
And especially when you're an entrepreneur, you got to focus on like decision fatigue is a real thing, right?
Yes.
You don't want to have all these decisions to make about things that you need to do every day. Like you need to eat every day. So if you're like, again, if you got lots of choice, you're wasting energy every day on something that you need to have dialed in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's taken away from other things that you could be doing that move the needle forward.
Right. Because like spending so much time and energy on deciding whether or not I'm going to break what I know I should be eating and like get some shit food is taking so much of a focus away from something I actually want to focus on. And like something you said like years ago, I saw in like one of your Facebook posts, actually, you wrote "eat to live, not live to eat," and like literally I had that on a Post-it note next to my desk for months, because like it's always like a good reminder of like when I'm in a good flow, food literally is just used as a tool for when I feel like less than satiated to make me feel satiated, and that's it. Like when I'm going really good, that's literally all food's purpose is. And when I break it, it's like I said before, it becomes like a focus and a priority and something you think about and like have to go out and get this ingredient and that ingredient and prepare and spend so much money on. It's like, it's just so much simpler by just not having to focus on that and using it as a tool.
What do you say to people like, I mean, there's some entrepreneurs that are like, yeah, fuck yeah, I get you, man. Like, and some guys are like, yo, I love my food. I like to have different ingredients and lots of choice.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people?
I mean, I'll say that any of my friends who know me, like, I am a huge foodie. Like, so I totally get like what they're saying. Like, I've found, even like to this day, I think in like more like special occasions, I still enjoy going to certain restaurants knowing I'm going to eat like absolute shit. But like, everything tastes so much better when you don't have it like very often. Like even like simple little simple things, like when you're not constantly indulging in it, it just tastes way better. And like, I think until you've lived feeling like absolutely free from like craving food, you can't understand how good it feels. And like to at least try it once in your life, to go a couple weeks without having shit that you know is bad for you, and just see how good you really feel for the first time. Yeah.
That's good advice. That's literally like what you're saying about elimination, right?
Yeah.
Like just eliminating all the crap
Right.
for a short period of time so you can experience that level of, oh, fuck, I feel really good. Like I've never felt like this before.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I don't want to go back to that
Yeah,
feeling.
exactly. And then like you said too, with elimination, there are certain foods like you can still eat after you've eliminated everything. Like you can kind of figure out like this works for me, this works for me. Right. And like you might still be able to eat some of the shit that are like the pleasures of your life without it actually negatively affecting you. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so how has this affected your business?
I think it's in like every possible way just allowed me to really dial in and give it the focus it needs. Cause like I notice like very quickly, like when I have brain fog after I've like eaten shit or like gotten off track in some way for a couple days. So just really having the energy to kind of give my business, like I'm not somebody who likes to work like 8 hours a day, but just having like 2 to 4 productive hours whenever I want to do it has been like really helpful for me.
And you're able to just give it all your focus.
Exactly.
Without having like a foggy mind or like falling asleep.
Yeah.
Like that, you know?
Yeah. Because like your energy is so much more consistent. And also like you're not getting up to like get snacks and shit and like make food 3 times. It's like when I sit down to work, it's like I know that I feel good and I'm going to sit there for whatever amount of time I'm going to sit there. And food isn't even on my mind at all. It's just all about work in that moment. And like that's something that like just from talking to a lot of my friends and like having lived this life, it's like I always used to be like in and out of the kitchen or like in and out of the bathroom, like stuff just like, yeah. Like when you eat shit, like you physically cannot focus the same way, like mental stuff aside, like it's just completely different.
Yeah, so absolutely. That's like mental clarity is super important, correlated to business.
Right.
Otherwise, you're like, because when you go to the bathroom or you go to the kitchen, like it takes you, I forget the stat, but it takes you like 5 minutes to get back in flow or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like I think people, like you said, like kind of don't factor that in. Like when you're in a really good flow, just kind of continuing. Like I use Pomodoro technique to kind of like go, if I feel like totally unmotivated to work, but like I know I have something, just like put on for 20 minutes. And like I know by the second cycle, I'm already good to go. And like I don't even need the cycles anymore because I'm like turning off the timer when it's over. So, but like breaking or interrupting that, then you kind of have to start over. It's like the whole like inertia, like breaking the resistance of just like movement of any sort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So is there any closing comments you want to share with people? Like, because, you know, entrepreneurs, like, successful entrepreneurs who live in the lifestyle that we're living, like traveling around the world and stuff. And a lot of their excuses are, when they travel, they lose their consistency or whatever. What advice would you have to give to like the guy that you were before you embarked on this journey?
Yeah, I think just kind of listening to people like me that kind of have been where you are now, feeling like this is just what your life is and like this is how it has to be and like you're never gonna do this and like it's unrealistic and like I've been there and broke out of that cycle despite being surrounded in like a pressure-packed environment in New York City of everybody and all expectations and this and that, like being as uncomfortable as you could possibly be, and kind of breaking free out of it. And like nothing, honestly, like I know people say this, like, but there's literally nothing that makes me like special in some way to like that it works for me. Like I think literally anybody can do this. And I feel like when I've talked to like friends and family, like a big point of resistance they've had is like oh, like that might work for you, but like it's not gonna work for me. That's not something I can do. And like I feel like if you just try and do it and just start like one day at a time, like you'll realize it is something you can do and have impact on your life like way sooner than you think it could.
Why do you think people are ignorant to it though?
I think it's because primarily like medical science is so persuasive to people. Like when you have an authority figure speaking on anything, but especially your own body telling you like you need to eat this way, have this amount of carbs, this amount of vegetables, fruits, blah, blah, blah. Like it's when somebody tells you like throw away all that shit and never eat a carb again, they're like, no, you're insane. And like you talk about like in your courses, like cholesterol and all that stuff. Like I can't tell you how many times I go to make like a massive thing of like bacon and eggs. And my dad is like, you're going to die of a heart attack. Like you don't care about your cholesterol. And I'm like, aren't you the one who has like a clogged artery and stuff? And you're telling me about cholesterol. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's the hard part, right? Is like relaying this information to the people that you are close to you.
Right.
Because they think that you're actually doing something hurtful, harmful.
Yes. That's why, and I asked them, I'm like, listen, like, are you going to listen to your doctor who looks like clearly overweight and like aging, or you can, like, I'm not like the most like perfect person ever, but like you can listen to someone who clearly has like changed their health in like a relatively short period of time, and somebody who actually cares about your well-being. But it's like that power of like authority is just like over stronger than they value my opinion, which they do, and like really care about me. Like I guess fear for what the doctors tell them is stronger than that. Right. Which is kind of something it took me a long time to deal with, I guess. Yeah.
It's just, I think it comes down to like just education. Like the more, like personally, the more I got educated on this, the more I realized, oh wow, this is actually, there's a reason why the doctors don't know this, or there's a reason why this is not being spoke about.
Right.
And it's understanding that, it's like, oh, okay, like this makes sense.
Yeah. And like you talk about like a reason for why doctors might know it, that's like a common thing my parents use against what I'm saying is like, oh, so you're telling me like this doctor who's been my doctor for 20 years isn't actually looking out for my best interests. And I'm like, no, like I really think they are looking out for your best interests. It's just the people and the institutions they're learning from teach them that this is the truth. So that's what they probably honestly believe is the truth. Yeah. And like the only kind of doctors you see speaking out against it are people who quit their jobs to like, otherwise you lose your license. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it comes down to just having that characteristic of having an open mind. Because if you don't have an open mind, then you're just going to shut everything down that goes against your ideologies, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think in terms of like having an open mind, something that's really helped me is like, usually I don't know the exact quote, but basically it said like, when you encounter someone with a different opinion, the first thing you do is you get defensive and like ready to be like, that's not true, like you're wrong. And like, even if you completely disagree with the person, I've found like, not only does it make the conversation better, but just like trying to take away like one thing that you can learn from their viewpoint has helped me kind of bridge the gap from like where I used to be, thinking like I needed to load up on carbs before a workout to where I am now by just like taking things that like I knew like triggered me and trying to learn where they're coming from. And like eventually you kind of learn to see a little bit of truth in everything.
Absolutely. That's a good refreshing perspective and approach, right? It's like if it triggers you, it's something to look into.
Yeah, for sure.
I wish most people did that. The world would be such a nicer place.
Me too. Yeah. It's like, it's hard to, it's funny because like obviously like your circle kind of changes over time, and it's nice having discussions with people when like I said, you can have varying opinions and just talk about it, rather than like most politics, for example, like you can't talk about it because if you disagree, you're wrong and you're the villain. And it's like, I don't even entertain conversations like that anymore because it's like such a drag. Yeah.
And it drains your energy, which is another thing, right? Like having energy is it's not just about food, it's like who you're conversing with, right?
Exactly.
And that can drain your energy like big time.
Yeah. That's something I've tried to get better at. And really on this trip here in Bali is like not making myself as like accessible to even being around people who have like a bad energy. Cause like I'm somebody who's like extremely empathic, and like I didn't realize just how much that was true until like more recently. And just like I would take on states from other people that I didn't even realize weren't my own. And I just realized when I keep my distance from certain things, like whether it be like people or even like music in certain ways, like that I used to find enjoyable, like I can just better regulate my mood and like my awareness of how I feel like all the time. Yeah,
that's very important to just audit your circle, right? Like who you're around, who you're interacting with. Like narcissists will drain the empath's energy like no other.
Like no other. Oh, man. How long were you in your narcissistic relationship?
Way too long. about a year.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was, it was bad. It's one of those things that, you can't, a fish doesn't know it's in water until you take it out, right?
Yes.
I didn't know I was in that, man. I was just like, what's going on? Like, why am I losing my confidence?
Yeah. Same here, dude. Yeah. Like I used to say like, I know something is wrong and like the words aren't matching up the actions, but like she's insisting they are. And like everybody around me is telling me that like, oh, like you can be difficult to date. Like she's probably right. And like all this stuff. And like, I was so confused for so long. And it wasn't until like, I just got lucky and like came across somebody who's like you should research like what a narcissistic relationship is and see if that's what is happening with you. Cause like you always hear that word in like TV and movies and stuff. Yeah. And I didn't really know what it meant. I just thought it was somebody who was like kind of obsessed with themselves or something. Same, yeah. And it wasn't until I really looked into it and like the whole cycle, I'm like, shit, like this is exactly what's happening. And like literally less than a month later, I was able to kind of break free permanently. Because I was caught in the cycle way too long. Yeah.
How long was it for you?
So, probably from like the time it like went bad until the time we broke up for the first time was 2.5 years. Whoa. And the funny thing is like I wasn't even the one who ended it because I became so needy and dependent on it. Like my whole life had become trying to fix stuff that I was told like I caused. And then even after the breakup, like I'm somebody who like in previous relationships never maintains any kind of contact. I don't do like the whole friends thing. Like once it's done for me. And this time I kind of let myself not do that. When she inevitably reached out and like circled back around, I was receptive because like I still felt like maybe if I didn't act all these bad ways that I was told I did, if I can just fix that stuff, then everything would be fine. So that cycle went on for like at least another 6 or 7 months of just like her coming back around, me believing that like she'd actually want to fix it. And then eventually I realized like, wait, like I've fixed everything that you said was wrong from my end. And this stuff is still happening. So like clearly there's an issue with you now that I'm now aware of. And like once I got to that point, I really was able to kind of like go a different path because it wasn't only like even like in a narcissistic relationship, like everybody has fault. Like the narcissist and the person who's not the narcissist are both at fault in any relationship. But like I was able to address my stuff and like she wasn't able to address hers. And like that's really what helped me kind of understand that dynamic.
That's really important, really powerful that you've overcome that. It's hard to do that.
Yeah,
it must
it
be
is
a lot of work to do that.
And that's like something that I feel has kind of kept me on track and like reinforcing that stuff is just wherever I can. Like if I meet somebody who is dealing with the same thing, I really enjoy talking about that stuff because it just like they say, like you learn more like teaching simple things than you ever do like when you learn them yourself. And just kind of reinforcing those lessons I learned by like saying the same stuff that I was told to someone else. It really just kind of keeps my head clear. Like because at the end of the day, we're all human, and like sometimes random thoughts come in your head, like, oh, maybe do I miss this person or not? Like, and just like realizing like not to identify with those thoughts, like the same as like you do in any meditation practice, and just like keeping you on track with like what you want for yourself and what you're willing to accept and like not willing to accept. It just keeps it really clear for me like what happened in that situation and to like leave it in the past.
Yeah, because it's easy to go back to it, but then it's like, again, the self-worth and the self-respect for yourself is like, no, I love myself enough to not go back there and hurt myself again.
Exactly. And like it's funny because like I've gotten to a point where I'm able to look at the situation like kind of pretty emotionally removed and say like, let's say I wanted to go back. If I ever do experience a feeling of like missing what we had or things like that, like I'm able to literally say like, wait, but if I go back, then I'm going to have to deal with this and deal with that and feeling this way and like, and all these things that she didn't understand about me, about all the ways I'm growing. And it's like, I literally like don't even want that stuff anymore. And I feel like when somebody in that situation can get to that point, it's very comforting to feel like even if you could have it, you literally turn it away.
Yeah. And that's a sign of your growth. You leveled up as a result of that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's how you know you're like, all right, I'm not accepting that anymore. I'm not tolerating, because you get what you tolerate, right? So
yes.
I'm not tolerating that shit anymore.
For sure.
Bye, Felicia.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about like leveling up. Like, I think one of my mentors said like the best way to grow that he knows is dealing with heartbreak. Because when you're like, I've had people very close to me die. Like my dad's sister literally lived next door to me my whole life. She was literally like a second mom. And when she died, I don't think it was nearly as tough for me to deal with as like going through the pain that I dealt with after the breakup from being in a relationship with a narcissist. Like it's like all encompassing. Like there's no way to get out of it except for just like dealing with it. And like for me, like luckily that's one of the benefits of like having my own business. It was like a lot of people who work at an office job can never actually deal with their shit. And like they just go through life jaded. And like I kind of made a promise with myself that I was never going to let that happen. So I kind of made it my life's focus and put everything else on pause to deal with this stuff and grow. And like I now find myself like in terms of leveling up, I think one of the biggest things is like finding a way to actually have faith in people despite seeing what I think is like one of the absolute worst like things you could see in humanity. And like you would think it would kind of be the opposite, like seeing and experiencing and touching firsthand like something so negative that it would kind of make you view others as like potentially harmful and negative all around you. And like I've just kind of learned to see the best in people and like really, like you said, like vet your circle and like keep people who don't belong in my life away. And like I've really learned to see what people really are right away and like not try and change it. Like I heard someone say once, when somebody shows you who they are, believe it.
Right.
And like a lot of times we don't believe it. We try to make excuses for it and like see what we think they could be rather than what they are. And like I've just learned to accept and trust what I think they are, even if it makes no sense to me. Like I just trust that intuition that I've built up. And like I've literally said to people, like you can't be in my life and I can't explain why. And I'm not judging you in any way, but I just know that you don't belong in my life. And like it's hard for people to accept that sometimes, but like I've learned to just be okay with it and trust whatever intuition I get in any situation.
That's amazing, man. I mean, there's people that are 50 years old that don't have that intuition built up, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I just didn't see that.
Yeah.
It's like, we all saw it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that helps you like be a better judge of character.
Yes, because like we talked about before, like, kind of feeling like all your self-worth and everything is gone. For me, the biggest thing I lost or felt I lost was trusting my intuition, because a lot of the stuff like 2 months into the relationship that I knew was like not right, it all ended up happening. And like the idea that like I at the time could have like avoided 2 years of like just brutal pain and like endless stress by just listening to myself, and like I chose to listen to somebody else other than myself, it really knocked me off having any kind of faith in myself like whatsoever. And that was like the main thing, like in addition to like working through all these feelings and stuff that I tried to do like for myself, was just do anything I could to like, anytime I got any kind of intuition, just like listen to it no matter what. And I would learn to see like where it like led me astray, and like understand like maybe if that was more like feeling and thinking than intuition, and like learning just when it's genuine intuition, and just like when it is, just like I said, trusting it always, because like I saw what happened when I didn't listen to it, and so now I just listen to it, even if it brings me like short-term uncomfortableness, or I don't even know if that's a word, but yeah, like whatever the situation is, I just listen to it now.
Because it's always going to guide you to the right decision.
Yeah. That's what I believe.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Because I think whenever we don't listen to our intuition, all the bad stuff starts happening.
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, damn it, why didn't I just listen to myself?
Right. And that's the thing. Like, I've never once regretted. I try to live like without regrets, but like there's things you can look back on and like wish you had done differently, of course. And like I've never once regretted something that I felt in my heart was the right thing and it didn't work out. But there's so many things that like I think back to, like the hardest moments I think back to are the ones where like I knew the answer and I didn't listen to it. That's for me like way harder. Yeah,
for sure. So the answer now, what's new for you? What's new and exciting for you right now?
I think for now I'm really just kind of focusing on me, like as cliche and like ridiculous as that may sound. A lot of my 20s, like I used to kind of define by my relationships. Like I had 2 big relationships that like served as like benchmarks for my growth. But also in between those, I was kind of like waiting for the next person and things like that. And like now I'm just really going back to like my life as like a single dude and just being totally comfortable. Like I take solo trips around the island, and just like when people ask me what I do in Bali, sometimes like I laugh, because like a lot of times I don't do anything like crazy. Like I don't go out too much. I just really enjoy like my alone time, my thinking, sitting on the beach, watching the waves, and like working on my business. And like that's like being super comfortable and like content and happy with myself doing that stuff, for me is like really the focus of my life at the moment.
That's awesome. And that's something that, I mean, COVID had revealed that to a lot of people, that they're actually not okay with spending time with themselves.
Right.
So that's like, I just think about it now, like that's one of the biggest goals in life, is to just be okay being alone with yourself.
For sure.
Yeah. And enjoying your own company, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, you're taking solo trips? Are you okay, bro?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's what people say.
Yeah. One of my friends, he's like the polar opposite of me. And like, at this point, he just gets like, I prefer my alone time. And he's cool with it. But he's like, to the point where he can't spend a couple hours on a Friday night alone. Like, he has to be doing something all the time. So I'm amazed at him for like having so much energy around people and in groups and out at bars and stuff. Because like, if I go out one night for like 3 hours, I'm like, I need to go home and like like recharge. And he's amazed at me just like being able to be alone, not seeing another person for like 2 or 3 days and loving it. So it's just kind of funny how different.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to have those people around, because you see a different perspective on things,
for sure.
Yeah, like I have that in my own life. My friends, like pretty much everything I say she disagrees with, but it's just interesting because she has a different worldview. So it's cool to. It's always good to be open-minded. She reminds me to keep open-minded. I'm sure that your friend does similar. Yeah. It's like, like you can see the qualities in that.
For sure.
Like, you just don't. You know who you are, so you don't. That's not me. You know.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Seth, this has been great, man. People are going to be pleasantly surprised by the amount of value that you shared on this.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, so I appreciate you coming into the studio and doing this. And any parting comments, any parting words, last words?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't have anything else.
Cool. All right, this is Seth Kaufman. You can find him at, where can they find you?
Yeah, my SEO website is vineconcepts.com. Yeah, where I do most of my stuff.
So if you need any SEO work done, Seth's your guy.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right,
Appreciate
cheers,
it.
man. Thanks.
Thanks.